Welcome everyone to today's Skillsoft webinar, the skills imperative of DevOps transformation, 4 solutions for avoiding DevOps training pitfalls. My name is Dave Lovell and I'll be the moderator for today. Thank you for taking the time to join us. We hope you find this session useful. Before we get started, there's a couple of things that I'd encourage you to do. The first one being to ask questions. Please ask questions throughout today's session. We will be having a dedicated Q&A time at the end, but please submit your questions as we're going through and we will try to get to those throughout the presentation. There is a dedicated Q&A box that you can ask questions through the Zoom function. Just a reminder that we are recording today's session and we will make a copy of the presentation slides available for you today after the session. And with that all covered off, it's my pleasure to introduce Skillsoft VP of Technology and Developer Products, Mike Hendrickson. Welcome, Mike. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Mike Hendrickson, and this is a conversation about DevOps and the skills imperative and how we think you can help individuals, teams, organizations make their DevOps transition or efforts more successful. As I mentioned, I'm the VP of Tech and Dev Products, which means I help define our roadmap, build our content plans, and the future directions we're heading. I've been in tech-related industries and businesses for a little more than 111 years now, and I always enjoy having conversations with our customers and learners. It's a great way to get content in and out of our organization. So I'm going to discuss around 4 solutions. There might be a few more than that in here, and let me go ahead and start progressing through. So some of the things I'm going to talk about today are some of my observations, and the observations typically come from customer calls and customer conversations in person, and they are from all around the world. I did take a tour twice through Australia and New Zealand and got some great feedback from your companies down there. Solutions. I'm going to start with 4 of them around how to start, how to get everyone on board, how to retrain the professionals you have, and then how to get management trained as well, because I think management's a really important part of how do we do DevOps successfully in any organization. And then some orgs also are starting to use DevOps as kind of agile throughout their organization. The two go really well together. And some companies, when you look at it organization-wide, really kind of make it more of a DevOps play than just an agile software development play. So I'm going to hopefully tease out the difference between the two of those and see where we can take things. So let's go ahead and move on to the next page. I love this image, and it's a real video, and it's really showing these guys changing the tires on a moving vehicle. That is a little bit about what transitioning to DevOps is like, because you still want to run your business and run your services and products the way you normally do, but you want to shift to a new way of doing it. And why do we want to shift to that new way? Yeah, typically you can see more innovation coming out of the way DevOps behaves, more efficiencies, definitely more efficiencies. It can lead to better security, especially if you're doing sort of DevSecOps, where you're building security all along the way as you're developing your software and your services. It definitely leads to flexibility and more agility. If done correctly, it does. It typically enables a better workflow, speeds up your go-to-market. And the go-to-market part's interesting because if you involve other parts of the organization in the product development, they're obviously going to be more suited to quicker to market with their services that help your product. And then the quality of service, the feedback from customers and better customer experience, all of that is things that we try to see through DevOps and through DevSecOps and data ops and other ops that are now cropping up everywhere. But DevOps was kind of the leader in this, trying to bring the two together. Let me talk a little bit more about what we've seen internally here. So I think when you look at Skillsoft, I think we're a pretty good proxy for what's happening in the market because we do serve most major corporations around the globe. And when I look at the data of what people are consuming, if we look at the past 3 years, which 2019, 2020, and 2021, 2019, we were just on the cusp of going into our, quarantine, COVID, no one travels anymore, we all work at home, that sort of thing. And then 2020, we were fully in it. And then 2021, we're still in it. And in some places around the world, we're in it even more and deeper and worse. But so what I notice here, though, is from an interesting perspective, SRE is not really a DevOps discipline. I put it in there because I think it's an adjacent technology, very, very closely related to DevOps. Some people do include it. I don't, but I did in this case here. It went from 0 to hero, or a nice percentage, in nothing in 2019 to 13% of all of our DevOps usage to 11% in 2021. And when I say usage, this is measurement of hours per area. So this is people consuming testing content. In 2020 was roughly 20% of all DevOps content was around testing. 8% was around automation. You put the two together, 28%. And then you put those two together in 2021, you've got 31%. What the charts tell me in a story is that DevOps foundations, the very basics of DevOps, is still very important to most organizations and growing. And what we have seen is roughly 80% of our industries that we serve are increasing their DevOps activities, their consumption of learning content. So it's no doubt getting bigger and bigger. And here's the some of the content that is driving that growth. And this is the only quasi ad in this whole presentation. I don't typically like to put our own content in here, but these are the things that people are consuming around DevOps in our platform. I put the 3 stars down here because of the adjacency relationship there. Couple quick point outs here. One is the network site reliability. I really think it's a great journey to have. And if you don't understand what a journey is in our book, it is transitioning from one role to a next role to a next and a next. So there's typically 4 roles. So they're role-based training that are very prescriptive and have hands-on labs and plenty of assessments to make sure you are understanding what you're doing. The other one I do want to point out, because I think this is going to be bigger and bigger and bigger going forward, is the infrastructure support engineer, which typically is a lot of the DevOps-ish type people, to cloud ops engineer. And this one I'm calling our endangered species journey, because I think there are a lot of people in this world who've been doing infrastructure support engineering. And now with DevOps, where you're mixing your operations and infrastructure together, and with cloud being done by other people, those people are kind of around looking for something to do or a new job. So we've decided we're going to transition them from infrastructure support engineers to cloud ops engineers. It's a great journey, doing really well. And let me go ahead and go forward. That's it on the advertisements for Skillsoft. So we'll move forward here. Observation here. Every industry, as you can see, has consumption of DevOps technologies. The first row here is automation, then CI/CD, containers, DevOps foundations, DevOps tools, SRE, and testing. And as you can look down the DevOps foundations, you can see which industries kind of are, I would say the ones that have the bigger bar here are the ones that are more nascent, going into DevOps a little bit, maybe behind the other market. So that would be aerospace, that's energy and utilities, nonprofit, healthcare, and legal are all kind of the newer ones to the game. And if I look for the story in this data here too, who is there and who is probably mastering this more, it's tech. It's the tech groups, because it's well balanced. They're among the leaders in almost every one of these groups. And they're more on the more advanced nature, the testing and the tooling part of it. So I would say tech is probably a little bit ahead, but we would expect that because kind of DevOps derived from that community a few years back, more like 12 years back. So there aren't a lot of surprises here, but the one big surprise to me is that every industry that we serve is in DevOps and using DevOps quite a bit. So let's move on forward. One of the things that I always look at here that I think is really important is how do you stay ahead of these roadmaps of DevOps tools, of ways of doing DevOps, of continuous deployment, continuous delivery. This could be a full-time job just mapping all of these items. Now, I do think it's important to survey the landscape and take note of items and approaches that may be well suited for your specific needs. Try a couple tools, maybe don't commit right away, but know what you want to do and then evaluate rather than get locked in early. Evaluate and evaluate because there is a ton of variety and different tools go with different types of deployment and services that you're going to be delivering. So, when you look at these different charts here, there's a lot there to learn. So putting it on your radar of how do you learn all of this, you need a learning provider that can give you all of that material and help you understand, what does it do rather than what does the tool do differently than the other tool. Understanding what it accomplishes for you is more important than understanding the bells and whistles of the specific tool. So always take it up a level when you're looking at that, because this landscape is going to change so quickly that you might say tomorrow, we need a new test automation tool. And, the ThoughtWorks that we had is a little bit out of date. Maybe we should, consider SmartBear, but at least you understand that what's being replaced is the test automation tool or your static analysis or your continuous configuration and automation, whichever tool it is, you can go in there and figure out which one you need to replace it with. That's the take home I look at when you see all of these maps, that all of these tools that change so quickly, you have to have some way of bringing it into scope and bringing it into what can we use and what can we do with it. So the point is, know that you can operate in an agile manner and especially operate with the tools as a supporting mechanism, not the driving mechanism. Have it support your style and what you're doing with DevOps, not vice versa. Don't follow the tool and then follow what it makes you do, because that's going to lead to probably not good outcomes for you. So let's move on to the next slide here. So DevOps, to me, WTF has a different meaning, although it does have that other meaning as well, but it's what's the future? And what is the future for success with DevOps? HR Tech did a survey to a ton of people in countries all over the world. And they asked what were the drivers for them to stay with the job, stay in the company they are with. And if you look here, worker well-being, I can understand why it accelerated up to number one in 2020. Obviously, people were worried about the pandemic and are they healthy? Are they going to be healthy in the office? All of those things. Obviously, a number one candidate there. But second one, kind of related to it, is workplace auditing, both from a physical, emotional, and environmental. And I understand that one too. It's probably closely related to number one there as well. But the one that really surprised me, that came up that wasn't in the year before, is this, not this one. This is a good one too. Let me recast that. So blended learning and on-demand coaches became a big thing. And I think the on-demand coaches, because we're not in person anymore. So I think more people want that touch, want that personal, like coaching, mentoring. So that's an important piece here. But the one that really surprises me is this one. The whole change of mentality on who you hire in an organization. And one of the solutions I'm going to talk about is hiring for skills, not pedigree. So you might come from one of the best universities, but if you don't have the skills to do the job, or you can't acquire those skills to do the job, your college pedigree really doesn't help. So it's really, what can you do with what you've learned, and how can you continue to learn and build the skills that are going to be needed in an organization. Now, the next 10 years, I find this also equally important, from wellness to happiness. So, in early times of COVID, we were all worried about our wellness. Now we just want to be happy again. We want to be around other people. We want to be happy. So that one is not a surprise. Talent mobility is also not a surprise. The great resignation that's happening around the globe. People know they can be effective from working at home. I think COVID kind of gave everyone a taste of, can I do this from my home, and can I do it well? And a lot of people are answering, yes, I can. So talent mobility is becoming more important. But the big one is learning to learn, learning to relearn, and learning to unlearn. And I want to unpack those just a little bit here, because I think these are really, really important. So learning to learn sounds easy. Sounds like that's just something natural that we all know how to do because we're human, and certain things we do. But when it comes to an expertise level, or a job role, or a skill, or something, a function you need to pick up in your programming, or whatever it might be, learning that is not just secondhand nature anymore. So you might not remember the techniques that you learned in college or in school years ago. They might have kind of gone away a little bit. So you might need to figure out, how did I learn? Did I have to highlight in the book? Did I not read the books? Did I just look at the end of the chapter tests? All of those things, what works for you, you need to learn how to do that again to keep your career going forward. To me, learning to learn is something like, my doctor told me to pick up the guitar and try to learn to play the guitar. So I'm learning to learn how to do that. And I know the things I've been doing haven't been working as well as I want. And I finally today went back to what I normally do, is take screenshots of the chords that I need to play, and I'm capturing them and putting them in order of the notes that I want to play. So I'm relearning how to learn. And that's something that we have to continue to do throughout our careers. The next one, learning to relearn. You might have learned something a while ago that may still not be relevant. Like for me, it was math. Like I learned math really decades ago, because I've been doing this 111 years now, but that was decades ago. And I keep thinking it would be great to have a refresher on advanced stats and probability and all of these different things that I'm not sure I'm still doing them correctly. So I need to relearn those. And I need to teach myself how to relearn the things that I may not be as sharp on as I used to be. So that's the second really important one. And then the third one, learning to unlearn. This may be the hardest to do. We all have probably said, well, this is the way it's always been done. That may not be the best way. It may not be the most efficient or the most effective. So we all need to shed some of the insights that are no longer serving us well. Do you build testing into your software before you start programming? Do you need to unlearn that handoff to another group and start to learn how to deploy yourself? Do you need to unlearn manual testing and have automation ready to go as you integrate into your larger code base? Do you need to unlearn getting security guys involved once you are ready to deploy, and learn to get them involved early on and throughout? So there are things that we all need to unlearn, especially if DevOps and Agile kind of methods are new to us or newish to us. So I think these three important factors here are learning to learn. And simple things like, what time of the day do you learn best? I thought everyone should be learning, because I read the book Peak that talks about your peak time of the day. And I thought everyone should be learning around 9 a.m. We all learn differently. Programmers may be learning at 2 a.m. or 11 p.m. And I looked in our platform to try to find a correlation of when do most people learn. And oddly enough, it was between 5 and 6 p.m. around the globe, which kind of just threw me, because I always thought that was the time people might be preparing dinner or those sort of things. But it's probably more that's when the end of their day is getting near, and there are less phone calls at the end of the day and time to kind of learn. That is probably not the peak time to learn, when our brains are a little bit more tired after a full day of work. But I think you need to learn what works for you. That's the point of this slide here. And I think it's a really important one. So 6 factors to help making DevOps a culture of learning, because I think the most successful companies really make DevOps a culture of learning. And I think one of the first things you can do is making it available 24/7, all expertise levels. You need to make sure you have all devices. It needs to be accessible for people who need accessibility. It has to be safe, and safe of judgment, and safe of mistakes, and safe of, if you have to take it 5 times to understand it, it's okay to do that. And that we need to have for everyone available. 2, and I think this is really important, the C-suite needs to get learning too. We want to have them avoid that left turn to mediocrity, going into management and losing their edge, losing that sharp ability to understand technology, to discern what they need to do, the decisions they need to make around it. So C-suite, we need to have material available for them, so the expertise levels for them to understand and work through. I think it's a really important piece. I think also with the C-suite and just the senior executive suite is you need to have expertise levels, and you need to have duration parts, because not every senior person has an hour or 2 to spend learning. Break it up, chunk it up, make sure that they can get through it, and help them keep their edge. And it's also important that they have the technical content that's deep for them, and the human skills content, the managing, directing people, communicating, those sort of things. So those soft skills, I think, are power skills. But for the C-suite, having tech skills also is a power skill for them. 3, primary goals for learning. Know what your organization wants to accomplish, whether you're on an upskilling mission, a reskilling mission, or a pre-skilling where you're having people try something that might be different with no judgment, no testing, just let them try, see how they like it, see if they do well. If they have the aptitude, keep pushing them that direction. That's pre-skilling, where there's no judgment around it. So understand what your primary goals of an organization are and how you fit in there, because you want to make sure your goals for learning also fit in with what your organization wants. Do you have a checklist to evaluate third parties? If you look at Skillsoft and our competitors and all of that, do you have a checklist where you evaluate them consistently, so you can check off, this is what we need, this is what we want, this is what we must have, these are all the pieces we need? So if you decide in a consistent evaluation where you have criteria that you set of what you need, want, have, it leads you to, do you also have the tech content you need, the soft skills content you need? And for most organizations, the compliance material that you're going to need to have as well. So when you look at that, evaluate all of the providers on that same sort of fairness criteria. Fair assessments. This is one near and dear to me. I think we were all done a big misservice when we went through school and we were judged on a normative-based testing, where we all went to school, we took a test, and we all felt we bombed it, and we all did, but someone still got an A because it was normative based or on the curve, as people would say. And so someone did get an A and someone did get an F, but there was a lot of, like no one really probably understood the material, even though they got an A on that one. And that's not a great way to test people. A fair assessment is that you set objectives for a course, and at the end of the course, you measure people on whether or not they understand those objectives now. It's very simple and very straightforward, but if you're going to have people and yourself as well take an hour out of your day to learn something, don't you want to know that you learned it? Not that how you compared to somebody else that might have been a dunderhead or a genius. Do you really care how you compared to that if you still don't know that material? Or if you do know it, you really don't care that you and he or you and she both know it. It doesn't do you any good. What does you good is to know you do know it. So make sure you have that fairness in the assessments you do. And lastly, continual opportunities for, and I can't stress this enough, safe environment. When I look at a safe environment, you should be able to practice without thinking, I'm going to harm my machine, I'm going to harm my network, I'm going to expose my company. Any of those things should go away. You should have a safe environment to work in. You should not be judged in that safe environment. You should have a broad range of practice opportunities, diverse topics, deep, where you can go as deep as you need to with those practices, and that they're practical, that you can actually relate them back to your work and back to your goals of what you want to learn in going forward. And one other thing I didn't put on here that I really should, and I should put it just a big giant red thing across here. We also need to make learning fun again. And I was talking to our CEO about this. It's something I think is really important, that learning as a kid, when we went to school and we were 3, 4, or 5 years old, it was fun. It was all game oriented, but we were learning. And then all of a sudden we became more serious and things became more boring. And you had to go to school and you had to learn and you had to take the tests and you had to do well to go into college and you had to do well there. Learning stopped becoming fun, and learning still should be fun. We should enjoy accomplishments we make in our learning every day. And I think that's a mission that I want to set out here and make sure we can bring some of that fun back into the professional learning space. So look for that in the future from us. And I'm now going to talk about some of the solutions that we're thinking about for DevOps. So your approach, always have an approach to how you want to go about this. Clear vision, clear goals, clarity about what DevOps is. Make sure that you're solving business needs, that it's not a toy project that you're doing. It's great to scope something small and something separate from your normal everyday products and services, but it should be something scoped that still is going to solve a business need. And you can do more. And then if you need to change, you course correct, or you fail forward fast. You learn from your mistakes and you change and do it better the next time. And it also gives you an opportunity to bring in customer feedback as you're doing those changes to make sure what you're delivering truly is going to meet the customer needs, not just your own development team's needs and their impressions of the world, because we all have our biases in the way we do things. And also just taking a look at your current value stream. What is the business value here? What can you do more efficiently? Can data help provide more insights? I know I've got a project where I'm trying to learn, and I'll talk about this in a minute, a little bit more about TensorFlow and related to search so that we can start to understand demand of content rather than just supply of what we have. Understanding your people and your team's needs. This is a tough one. I think for most tech people, here's where I can say Skillsoft, hands down, with all of our leadership and business content, can really help people because we have some great content there. And again, I think those soft skills are power skills for developer. And most people getting started with DevOps have done some sort of software development lifecycle approach in their development. And this brings in the notion of reskilling or unlearning, because your SDLC approach is probably not really going to work in a DevOps world. You're probably going to have to do things a little bit differently, and you're probably going to have to learn a few new things. So be very sensitive and understanding of your team's needs, because as you're going to see here in a second, I've got some ideas on how to construct those teams. And I think the more diverse, the better they will be. And so let's go ahead and move into those and talk about what I'm saying there. So solution one, role-based training. And again, role-based is, here's the role you're in today and the role you want to move towards. So today you're infrastructure support engineer and you want to move to DevOps. Let's just say that's a role you want to go to. There are steps in between there to help you get there. So in a normal situation, you probably want to look at a normal, well-known system that you have, that it's probably built around some manual processes that you're doing, but look at ways you can automate those things. So confine this well-known system and scope it for this team. And this is just for an existing team that you have in your organization already. Now bring in some members with long tenure at your company, because they have a lot of institutional knowledge, and bring in some newer employees too and mix them together in a team. And you'll see there'll be some sort of self-selecting around this, and use some mentoring, but let innovation percolate, because what can happen with those long tenured people, they have these new people wanting to kick the doors and they've got new ideas and they're going to be pushing it. And the long tenured members probably have some ideas why it doesn't work or why something else could work. So it's good to cross-pollinate those sort of those people. And then the mentoring part can happen naturally. Make sure that these teams that you're rolling out are enabled with decision-making authority and autonomy, that they can actually get their project going, they can keep it going, they can launch it, and maybe it's to a smaller audience or a beta audience or something like that. Typically keep the teams to a 2 pizza level, where you can feed people with 2 pizzas. That's the size of the team. Recruit both internally and externally, get the right mix. And mentors can help retain talent. So you can recruit and you can have talent internally, but if they don't stay there, it's going to be hard to really deliver your products the way you want to. Cross-functional mix, I think, is really important. Your UI UX people, your security people, your data people, have them all mixed on that DevOps team together. Keep your eye open, though, that you're not creating your own mini IT department, because that could become yet another silo. I don't know if that's a yes or something, but yet another silo is probably not good. So keep your eye open that you're not creating this autonomous, independent silo of IT. Let your team, though, figure out the best release rates, collaboration tools, the ultimate goals. And I think one of the most important pieces is have everyone trained with the same nomenclature and approaches, and everyone is taking the same training. Even if Joe has 30 years experience, have him take the same training. And the reason I say that is when you learn from the beginning what everyone else is learning, you're on the same page. You understand what they just learned. And if you don't agree with it, you can tell them the parts you don't agree with, but you can't tell them that if you didn't take the training. So have everyone on the same page by the same training. And typically, when you learn fundamentals again at the very beginning, it takes you back down to the roots or to the base of what you're trying to understand. And I think that's great for everyone on that team to be grounded like that. So that's solution number one, is training your existing teams and making sure they're all consistent on that training. The next one, solution 2, is role-based training to upskill a cohort that has very little experience with software development. This is typically the fresher. You just hired a whole crop of graduates out of college and you want to get them going. So you can evaluate your talent, you can promote talent, you can start with a clean slate, you can hire for skills and not pedigree. And Google did a great job of that, just by the way. I mean, they did some really interesting, diverse hiring. And it's a great way to make more cross-pollinated teams, and better ideas will come from that. So that's the first one. Evaluate the talent that you're going to put together into a training program and work with the people you have. Upskill, reskill, or pre-skill. Plan for these cohorts to move together. Start with the fundamentals and make sure they're all on the same page, and then slowly make it progressive, more difficult for them. Do the assessments and measurements and know where people stand. Don't use it against them, but know where they stand. And one thing I think is really important is providing the practice to build durable skills, to make them functional in building, testing, deploying on a continual basis. You have to be able to practice that in a safe environment, which I mentioned earlier. That whole thing about the safe environment is really important. So this solution 2 is as close as you're going to get to producing your own DevOps native team, where they're going to be functioning as a DevOps team. They're not all newbies. You've got new talent, you've got promoted talent, you've got clean slates. You're not working with unlearning people. You're just getting them all going on the same road together. The next one will be a little bit different. And this one is role-based training to keep the professionals you have in both tech and non-tech. So in this one, you're looking inside your company at all the different people that have been around for a while. And a lot of them have probably done traditional SDLC and want to work in a more DevOps manner, or they already are, and let them keep doing that. But the one thing that this is from HR Tech, the things that really pique my interest about this that are so important for this solution 3 is among digital experts, which you'd consider a programmer, developer, someone doing DevOps. Number 2 and number 3, are these the reasons people stay at a company or leave a company? And this is what they were measuring here. So obviously the good work-life balance is always going to be important for people. Whoever wants to say, I really don't care if I have a regular life, I'm just going to work and work and work. But 2 and 3 did surprise me. They were so high up for digital experts that people want to know their company is investing in them and giving them career development opportunities. For your digital experts, you can see it's twice as much as the non-experts. So I think that's a really important one. So when I take this back up to this number 3 here, keep talent by investing in their future, because institutional knowledge is so hard to replace. Training will go a long way at getting them all on the same path. But once they're starting to roll along and they're working in DevOps team, you have to keep challenging them. You have to keep giving them more to chew off and to use. So think about the adjacency technologies I mentioned earlier. You might have a DevOps engineer who's been doing it for a couple of years. Is he ready for performance engineering to make sure your systems and your services are highly performant? Are they ready for SRE, where in the next pandemic, when we shut down or we don't shut down, that your systems will remain intact and working? Challenge them to those other things, because it shows right here, they will stay at your company if they feel you're developing them and you're developing their career. They will go if they don't. That's part of, I think, this great resignation going around the globe, is that there are so many opportunities out there, and the people that have left didn't feel their companies were investing in them. They might have been paying them, but not investing in them. That's a different thing. So keep those in mind for solution 3. The way you keep talent that you have in your organization is challenge them, give them training, give them opportunities to grow, and they will stay with you. And the 4th solution, and I think this is the hardest and maybe the most rewarding, is our leaders and our decision makers, both tech and non-tech areas. Everyone always says a leader can lead by example. That's great, but they have to know the examples. They have to understand what an example looks like in tech and what the tech knowledge they need can help them do. So I also think avoiding that fork to mediocrity is very important. And when I say mediocrity, going down that management path doesn't mean you're going to be a mediocre person. But if you don't stay sharp, both on your management skills and your tech skills, that's when you're going to get not sharp. So make sure you understand both, because trust does go both ways. You can always trust the team you've built to give you the right knowledge and to give you the right information. But if they got information from someone else that might not have been correct, you need to be able to figure that out yourself. So keep your technical edge sharp. Make sure you keep your leaders sharp. Get in them training that is at their expertise level, their time level. They might only have 5 or 10 minutes. Perfect. Get them that content, get them that training. And they also need to, and this is one of the hardest parts here. Leaders typically go up a layer or couple, and they have to understand all of the adjacency technologies and how they overlap. They can't just be focused on, my automated testing tool with Selenium, and I'm just going to do this and this. They have to understand how that fits in the whole larger picture. So make sure that you have both the breadth and the depth for them. And their depth doesn't have to be as much, but you have to have that breadth for them. Because their institutional knowledge is even harder to replace, because typically leaders have come from some experience and some knowledge and have worked their way up, and you don't want that walking out the door. So again, I think these are really important things. And when you think about, you have a group at your organization that's wanting to become a leader, and they have all of these opportunities, especially around DevOps, because it's such a big and growing area. They'll need a broad understanding of all those adjacency technologies and the DevOps work as well, including like Agile, how to get executive buy-in, how to really build a culture of learning and failing forward fast. How do you get your business alignment? How to build process and test automation into your development? How to address the drain of your legacy applications on your organization? There are so many things. How to leverage third-party platforms, how to measure progress and metrics. How do you do all of these things? And then we throw in, now that you've got all those things that are related to DevOps, now you also need to understand security, cloud, programming, your infrastructure and operations. You need to understand business requirements. These folks have a lot on their plate, so let's make sure we keep them sharp and trained. And that'll be one way you'll definitely succeed, because a good leader can help your DevOps team succeed. So solution 4 was role-based training that combines both your understanding of tech skills needed in DevOps and the human components of people, communication, collaboration, and teams. Those together are really powerful to have a great future with DevOps in all your activities. So 10 strategic steps to make DevOps stick. I have a few here, 10 of them. Customer first. Why do your customers need enhancements or transform right now? What customer problems are you going to solve? How will this change and deliver the value to your customers? Simplify your architecture. Microservices can do that. It can also make it more complicated. I have this notion where I heard years ago, Microservices can cause an orchestration nightmare, but start with splitting your big monolithic service into two, get those two halves, making sure they're still working, then split those into two and make sure those keep working, and so on and so forth, rather than breaking them all up into pieces right off the bat and then orchestrating them back into working together. So just a different approach. Think about it. It might work for some, might not work for others. The next one is design for performance and flexibility. What aspects are you trying to do? Is speed important? Are people going to abandon your application, your service, if it's less than 0.05 seconds? Might be. I think that's the current thing. They will. So what is the most important thing here? Is flexibility more important than performance? Probably not. I think performance is likely higher. You'd like to have both, but I think performance is the most important. What kind of expected and unexpected changes will you have to deal with? Knowing those ahead of time. So design for that flexibility, design for the ability to change. Engage your workforce. This is a good one because this goes right back into that learning why people leave a company. But when you're building software, what do people need from your systems to be productive? And how do you know what it is? How do you know if they're engaged with what you're doing? If you're building that culture of learning where they want to come in and contribute and do something different? What are the technologies they're using? Are they capable of using them? Do they need training on it? So think about that as part of your workforce and your capability, and cultural changes that your new systems bring. Will they have to do things differently? Will they have to unlearn? Will they have to relearn? Or do they just need to learn? So think about those who are trying to get an engaged workforce, because that is really important to delivering that continuous development. Adopt a services mindset. What are the essential services that you need to provide for your organization? Are you organized and funded around those to provide outcomes rather than the assets that you're managing? Are you looking for the outcomes, or are you just managing a set of assets? What other services could you offer in an effective way if you were better organized? So think about that, because I always think about product and service as the same thing. And likely because I work at Skillsoft and our product is kind of a service. But I think today that's the way it is for almost everyone, that your product kind of is a service, and having that services mindset will really go a long way. Next is plot your journey before starting. What are the critical steps for migrating to a new system, whether it's cloud or something else? What do you need to do at each step? Plot this out before you begin. How do you adapt? How do you course correct? How do you fail forward fast? How do you make sure that where you're going is really where you need to be? You go along, you do increments, and you figure out if that's still going the right direction. And then also evaluating your vendors and your technical solutions. Are they the best fit for the critical capabilities that you need? Always plot that out on your journey and make sure you reevaluate those all the way along. Organized by capabilities, or squads, I think are the term today that everyone likes to use. The most critical ones that differentiate your company. Make sure you have your top-notch DevOps squad working on that one. The differentiators are really important. How does your ability to modernize and keep your tech stack going forward impact your capabilities? And then what are the solutions that your vendors that you work with are delivering to you, and are they helping or hindering your ability to move forward in your squad's ability? The next one is be agile and user-centric. And agile is probably an overused term, because I think people just think doing things quickly and off the cuff is a little bit more agile. Not the case at all. Really understand what product is versus project, and understand the differences there for how do you build software in an agile fashion. How do you focus more on the user and the customer in your agile development? Can you use analytics and UX to improve your products in addition to your customer inputs and all of those things? So think about what you're calling agile, if it really truly is agile or if it's masquerading as agile. And then lastly, the last two, I think this is really important. Invest in resources that can make change stick. What's going to be the greatest return for you? What in the greatest return is going to keep more people on board and learning and building that culture of DevOps that you want to build? What are the skills needed with new systems and how do you build them? How do you realign resources and support your services and your development while the business keeps running? Again, changing the tires on that moving vehicle. That's the hard one to do, but invest on the resources that make the biggest difference. And last, partner with shared trust and shared values. Not all partnerships are great. Make sure you understand what you're partnering for, why, that it's a similar value, similar shared values, shared trust, and that you can work together going forward. So final observations, and then we'll have some Q&A if we can. Walk before you run. I think that's kind of logical. I've got a new grandchild, so I'm watching this whole walk before you run. Build extensible tool chains that can grow and be modified. I look at that as frameworks are intended to be modified. Think of things in the framework mentality. Secondly, all in. Don't just test on some toy project. Go all in fully on one project on DevOps and make sure you build that diverse team with experience and all the different capabilities that they bring from different backgrounds together. So use that head to toe on a select project where you can fully experience it. Grounding is great. Get teams on the same wavelength, the same nomenclature, the same view, approaches, tools, all of that. That consistency will really help communication increase and be better, and delivery better and more consistent. Breadth is better and depth is great. I like them both. I kind of think of them as becoming a versatilists, where you are deep and broad. That's where we're going in the world. Gartner has a whole report on versatilists. I think it's a really interesting concept, but you have to have depth and you have to understand the breadth of everything you're doing. You can say right here, security. Security is related to all of the different areas we work with. So, you have to have that depth and the breadth and the depth and the versatility. Hybrid, lastly, in DevOps, only with your tools. Don't hybrid with your approach. Don't do a little SDLC with DevOps. You can with your tools, you can mix some of those in, but keep hybrid out of your approach to building software, but keep it in your tools. I think it's fine for your tools. So again, I think these are some sound things that you can take to the bank. Any questions come up? There's chat. Let's see.
Doesn't look like we've got any questions today, Mike. You've covered everything completely.
You never know if that's good or bad.
Well, what we might do is, if there's no questions coming in now, if anyone has questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out to your Skillsoft representative. They'd be very happy to answer any questions and direct you through to Mike. So thank you, Mike, for joining us and staying up to present to our region. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining.